midnight to midnight, that's the only time you get to celebrate your birthday, like Cinderella. And so I was like, you know what? Just throw out the rules. Why do those have to be the rules? Why can't I celebrate my birthday the way I want to with 12 birthday trips instead of this cake, instead of having a party where you feel like it's super stressful because are people going to show up? Am I going to look a certain way? Do I have to be really flashy, get all these things done? There's so much work that goes into preparing that to celebrate your birthday externally, for other people to show up to your party, for you to look good to other people. But when you travel, it's internal. You're going because you want to feel good. You want to feel good inside. You want to feel happy. You want to feel stress-free. You want to feel excited about what you're doing. And it's a completely different energy. And so that was the challenge that I took on. I did it.
Welcome to the Travel Not to Escape podcast. I'm your host, Jolene on the Go, solo female traveler and creative entrepreneur. Think of me as your skydive instructor, empowering you to take the leap into solo travel to push past your fears and transform your life. Join me every Tuesday as we explore the world of solo travel with purpose and discover how you can use it for your personal transformation, learn how to make meaningful connections around the world, and reignite your spirit of play. We aren't just talking about traveling to find ourselves anymore. We're all about doing the work to understand who we authentically are, breaking through our limiting beliefs, and taking the leaps to manifest lives we are excited about. Through interviews, solo episodes, and meditations, each episode is packed with practical tips, strategies, and inspiring stories from guests who have transformed their lives through solo travel. Whether you're a seasoned traveler or just starting out on your journey, the Travel Not to Escape podcast is here to inspire and empower you to solo travel with purpose. Strap on your helmet. We're about to jump headfirst into the journey of a lifetime. Are you ready? Let's go. Hey navigators, welcome back to another episode of Travel Not to Escape. Before we dive into this week's episode, I want to ask, how do you feel about your friendship making skills? Because a big fear that comes up with solo travel is, how can I make friends in a new city? And not just small talk friends, but meaningful friendships filled with laughter and deep conversations. Friends that you stay connected with, even if you're in different cities. And a lot of the resources that are out there for connection aren't that easy to find. You can go down the route of doing multiple Google or Facebook searches, going to endless amounts of events, and still feeling pretty lonely and empty. So this is a reason why I created Passport to Connection. I've turned the process of making friendships anywhere in the world into a fun board game style membership where there are clear steps to this journey and resources for you to understand the how in making friendships, plus a supportive community to go on this journey with you. So if you want to find out more and how you can join, head to travelnottoescape.com/friends. See y'all there. Welcome to today's Travel Not to Escape episode. We have our guest today, Jen Ruiz of Jen on a Jet Plane. She is a multi-hyphenate travel writer, 3-time TEDx speaker, and 5-time Amazon bestseller author with her new book, 12 Trips in 12 Months. Available on pre-sale now. And I'm so excited to have her on today's episode because her life and the pivots that she's made is exactly the type of story we love to feature on this podcast. She made an incredible life pivot 8 years ago from working as an attorney and being in law school debt of over $200K to now being a well-recognized travel expert with multiple income streams and inspiring and empowering other women to change their lives, travel more, and work remotely. So today we get a chance to dig into Jen's story and get a bit of a sneak peek on her new book, 12 Trips in 12 Months, to learn about her life pivot, what that looked like, and what brought her to where she is now. Thank you so much for being on today, Jen. I'm so grateful to be able to chat with you.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yay. And I'm so excited. I have so many questions regarding your story, but let's start with, where are you joining us from today?
I'm in St. Petersburg, Florida.
Oh, wow. Okay. So Jen is in Florida. I'm in the Philippines. So we are a whole half day apart right now. But that's also the magic of solo travel and also in connections. I like to structure my podcast episodes sandwiched in between questions of play. I like to start with play. I like to end with play. So I want to ask you first, to get to know you a bit, what was your favorite childhood activity?
That's a tough one. Maybe reading or doing things with my mom. I did a lot of things with my mom. We would go on a lot of activities. Like we'd go to matinee movies. We'd have an ancient Egypt hieroglyphic stamp kit and we would make stamp things together. different crafts, things like that. I still do it to this day. We actually have a date later this month to go to a quilting event, and we're going to go see a play together. So all of
Oh, I
those
love
things, I think
that.
just being active. Yeah, because this is before cell phones. So it's like, how do you entertain yourself in person? And so things, physical things, reading, board games, anything where I'm working with my hands, arts and crafts, I think those are really entertaining.
Oh, I love that. And I asked this because there's actually 8 categories of play personalities.
Mm.
And so Dr. Stuart Brown, play researcher, he did thousands of play histories with people to be able to understand the root of play in people's lives. And he came down to these 8 categories, and a few of which that you mentioned. So you mentioned reading. So that very much ties into a storyteller play style. And then also you mentioned arts and crafts. So those are creative. You said board games, so maybe a little bit on the competitive side. And then the explorer too, because it sounds like a mix of different things was what lit you up and just trying new things in general. So I'm almost leaning towards storyteller and explorer for your play style. What does that sound like?
I think that's very accurate. I'm impressed you got that off of one answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to learn more about those styles. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a great way for me to get to know someone too, because a lot of the times, actually, I've asked so many people this question now, and it actually links back to what lights you up in general. And if you're tapped into that as an adult, you can also see how that actually shows up in your adult life. And we're going to get to know you a little bit more in this next hour. And I already know exactly how this ties into your adult life, being, again, an author, being in this travel space, explorer energy, storyteller, play personality. So this is all very much in line, and also makes me see how tapped into yourself you are, because you're living and doing the things that used to light you up as a child as well. So that's amazing. So
Thank you.
going into that a little bit, I'd love to know a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up, and how was travel a part of your life growing up, and how did you find your way to solo travel?
Yeah, I don't know that travel was necessarily a part of my life growing up, other than the small local trips. So my mom was a teacher, and my first time going to Europe wasn't until I graduated from high school, and it was a 2 week trip with my mom. It was a mother daughter trip. We're very close, in case you can't tell. She's
I
come up like
love
20
that.
times, and we're 5 minutes into the episode. But we would never go on like grand. I think we maybe did Disney World like one time. And it was towards about the time where I was already about to be out of the house. So we never did big vacations, but we always did small vacations. I remember specifically we went to the second largest pedestrian bridge in Pennsylvania, because I grew up in
Oh.
Philadelphia. And I remember being like, why are we at the second highest bridge? It's such a random thing to go see. And that's why it stuck with me. You know, the Frank Lloyd Wright House that's in Pennsylvania, all those things that as a child I didn't necessarily understand or appreciate. And now as an adult that I'm obsessed with Frank Lloyd Wright. And I remember going to Falling Water and seeing waterfalls running through a house. And as a child, that was my first time seeing something like that. So we would do trips, but it would be small local trips. And being in Philadelphia, it was easy to do that with a lot of educational elements, because you could go to New
Mm.
York, you can go to DC, you can go. We went to Amish country many
Oh,
times,
yeah.
so just little trips like that is how I got started with travel. And then that big 2 week post high school graduation trip was my first time in Europe, and that was the first time that I realized that I actually was really good at planning travel, because we
Mm.
were with a Trafalgar tour. This was back when AAA and like travel agents and things were very popular and pretty much the only way to book. So we booked a tour, and it was an organized tour. And I remember there was a dinner where we sat and we were having like peas and ham, which I'm Puerto
Oh.
Rican. And we would never, I've never ever in my life sat down and had a slice of ham and frozen peas that have been warmed up as my dinner ever. And and I definitely was not about to do that when I'm sitting in Italy with the
Oh,
world's
no.
best food. So I think we ate, like, I begrudgingly ate some of that. And I was like, Mom, no, this is garbage. And I know I can do better. I know I can get us around, and I know we can find somewhere to go, and we should really just ditch the tour group. So I had my Europe, I did legitimately, I had my Europe for Dummies book, which is
Nice.
actually a really great book. It was pretty good on, this is where the bus leaves from. This is where you should go. And so we ditched the group, and I was able to see more. We went to Stonehenge when we were in London, and I was pretty sure,
Oh,
forget
you
us there.
fully ditched the group.
I ditched the group. I was like, we're not doing this. This is not enjoyable. We are in this country. I'm not eating frozen peas and ham anymore. Let's go and actually enjoy Europe. And so we did. And There were some moments I wish the Europe for Dummies book would have said that like the subway in Italy stopped around midnight, because there was a point where I was like, okay, now we just got to get on this train to get back to the hotel, and then the train is closed, and then I was like, oh, what do I do now? So there were some moments where it didn't necessarily go 100% as planned, but for the most part, it was much more memorable to take off and do those things ourselves than have to follow a flag and feel like you're being herded. That's never been my thing.
Yeah, and you recognized that early on. And this was, what year was this when you all went?
2005.
So before really GPS smartphones, Wi-Fi was fully accessible. I remember traveling Italy in 2009, and that was still paper maps. You had your guidebook. So yeah, so this is you actually having to figure things out on the fly. And I think right now it's a lot easier because you have so much access at the tip of your fingers, being able to figure out where you are and like what the bus schedule or metro schedule is. But this is you like going bravely off and figuring it out. So that's amazing. That energy in you started pretty early. I took a look in your career history. So it looks like you worked your way up the legal ladder. So you did a lot of policy, judicial internship, clerkships. You made it all the way until working as a lawyer full time. And then you made a life pivot. I saw you pivoted into doing more social media, more travel writing. And can you dive into that piece a little bit? So, after you did this big trip post high school graduation, working your way through college and your first job, was travel a part of your life during those years at all, or did you put that on the back burner?
I wanted it to be, but I'm very ambitious. Like we mentioned, the board games and the competition. And so from the moment I got into undergrad, I knew I wanted to be president of that school. And so I spent 4 years working my way up the student government ladder, being involved in everything possible. So I couldn't take off because I'm running a 4-year long campaign to get to president, which I ultimately didn't win because for whatever reasons. So because of that, I wasn't able to do traveling in undergrad. And then when I got to law school, same thing. I've always been very ambitious. So I had 3 jobs throughout law school. I've always, even now, it's like and nothing's changed, right? Like I still feel like I have to make a name for myself, like as a travel writer, as an influencer, as an author. Like I can't just be one thing. And so in law school, it was similar. And I realized that I was about to graduate and I was about to have spent so much money on 7 years of higher education, only to have never taken advantage of any study abroad programs. So I did take a course in law school about constitutional law reform for the sole reason that summer, after you took that course, you could do an internship at a law reform commission somewhere around the world. So I spent a summer with the Australian Law Reform Commission in Sydney in law school. That was by myself. Yeah, that was my first time longer term. It was my first time being super far away from everyone, like you said. So everybody's on an opposite schedule of you. So when I want to talk, people are asleep. And then when I'm asleep, people want to talk. And so it felt very isolated and just literally across the world from everybody. Australia is just a wonderful place. Like it's so safe and it's so just really, it's just that it was a great place to go and do that in what I felt was a very safe container.
And was that moment in your life, did that change a lot of things when you came back into law school, finishing up, going into your career? Or was that something that you did and then you went back into your like quote unquote normal life?
It did change a lot of things for me. I will say that with that Australia trip, as much as I enjoyed it, I'm happy that I did go. I actually personally would never be a nomad. And I don't know, maybe never is a strong word, but I can't stay long term in other countries. It's hard for me. There's just so many conveniences that I'm used to with the US. I really appreciate that I can get my feminine products, my chocolate, and my Advil in one store when I have that time of the month. I don't have to make 3 trips. And in many other countries, those are 3 different stores. Where you get your feminine products, where you get your chocolate, and where you get your medicine are going to be different places. And that's an example of one of the conveniences of being in the US. And I can't be that far from my family. I can't be that far from my mom. I have to see her regularly. Even when I was living in Puerto Rico, it was still really difficult. Like I see her at least 3 times a year kind of thing on the holidays. But when you're living, like if I'm in the Philippines, to come all the way back like 3 times a year, it's not only a lot of money for the plane ticket, a lot of time. And so it's really that much harder. So for me, living abroad was not something that I was going to do. And I think Australia showed me that. And I actually have what I tell myself is a 3-week limit in another place before I start to get really antsy and before things at my home suffer. So that's another thing. Like I have things at home, I have a business, things like that. Like it's hard for me to be gone full on all the time. And I love souvenirs. And it's really hard to be traveling all the time because then you have to travel really light. You can't buy anything. And I have a home that's filled with the most unique stuff from all over the world. If you tell me while I'm traveling, this is a one-of-a-kind piece, somebody carved this, hand carved this, or hand painted it, or hand beaded this, I am hooked. I am in. Whatever this is costing me, this is worth it. And they see me coming from a mile away. Like, I will never, ever pay that for mass-produced stuff, but I will pay a premium for one-of-a-kind, handcrafted things that I know really speak to me. And so really most of my house is that. I'm looking at a gorilla statue right here from Rwanda that was hand carved, and these little handmade Russian doll boxes from Kyrgyzstan that have the little yurts inside each other. So I have a bunch of things everywhere, and it makes me very happy. I do really love collecting.
I think it's cool to be able to see what other people are drawn towards on their travels. So thank you for sharing that. So from your time in Sydney, you realized you didn't want to do it fully long term, but that travel was still something that you wanted to continue. So you came back into your law career. And at what point then, how many years and what brought you to this tipping point of making this challenge for yourself of traveling for 12 trips in 12 months?
So I graduated law school at 24. I was already a bar attorney by that age. I'd started working and I had practiced law for 5 years, and I realized that I was about to turn 30 and I didn't have, besides the amazing career, which is obviously a big deal and awesome, yay, but I hadn't really enjoyed my 20s. Like I hadn't done a keg stand. I hadn't done like any silly random things because I've been working so hard to get to where I was and to be president of my undergrad and to do all these things. So I'd never had a point where I was just like, let's have fun, let's be young, let's do cool things. I was always very driven. And then also, I think you're supposed to get to 30 and be in a relationship, be married, have children, have that figured out. And I think a lot of people approach 30, and especially as a woman, if you get to that point and you're not married and you don't have children and you don't have a boyfriend, people start to ask you what's wrong with you. Why are you still single? Why are you the last person that has been picked for the dodgeball game? And what is your fatal flaw so that we can identify that immediately before we even go any further, so I can know why are you one of the leftover women that hasn't been picked? And how you're, that's how you're treated approaching 30, which is really ridiculous because it's just crazy, and it's not anything at all that men have, and it doesn't take into account, the fact that women do have lives that's more than just getting married and raising a family and having children, which is still a wonderful thing to aim for, but we have so much more to manage now. So having that goal by 18 is not how life works anymore. It's not reflective of 2024. But at the time, I still felt very much that kind of pressure. And I had been going on dates. I've been on Tinder for a while. And I remember thinking, this is not working. And I feel like I could either double down and do more of it and be really crazy, like swiping all the time, going as many days as I can, and feeling like that pressure to at the very least find a person by 30 so that you feel like you're not into this spinsterdom of I have to adopt cats now. And so that was one option. And already I felt so exhausted by that before it even began, of like the prospect of having to work so hard to manufacture that outcome. And then I just decided instead, I originally had a trip from one of the prior Tinder people who ended up ghosted me. It was a med school student. And this was, again, when I was young and not understanding that you shouldn't do these things. But I had bought tickets because he was a poor med school student, super broke and everything. And so I was like, and I was an attorney. So I was like, okay, I'll buy his tickets to go to New York for New Year's Eve. And then in December, he completely ghosted me. So I just never heard from him again. And I had these tickets that I had to New Year's Eve in New York. And I ended up trading those in and getting a ticket because I still wanted to go somewhere for New Year's Eve. And I still wanted to do something for my birthday, which is on January 3rd. So shortly after New Year's Eve. So I traded in those tickets and I got a ticket to Athens, Greece. And then I took myself to Greece for my 29th birthday. I saw the Parthenon and I remember sitting there. Yeah, I remember. And even though it's not technically a world wonder, it's been ripped off and it should be. But I was sitting there and I was thinking, this is really great. This is a really memorable, awesome, fun birthday. And it doesn't matter that nobody's here with me. I'm having a really wonderful time eating my moussaka and touring Athens and just going around on my own. Like, I really enjoyed it. It was a beautiful day. It was January and it was in the 70s. It was just perfect. It was a perfect day for me. And I remember thinking, I would love to have this feeling for the rest of the year. Instead of the feeling of anxiety, not enoughness, move faster, do more, I would love to have the feeling of just, wow, this is really cool. I'm really enjoying myself. I had such a great day today. I made amazing memories. And so I decided that I was going to take a 12 trips in 12 months challenge. So I would challenge myself to do one trip like that every month to send out my birthday. This, considering also that I had never done anything more than a 24-hour birthday celebration. I never asked anybody to celebrate a week-long birthday with me. I never had a month calendar of festivities. I've always been so strict. Midnight to midnight, that's the only time you get to celebrate your birthday, like Cinderella. And so I was like, you know what? Like, just throw out the rules. Why do those have to be the rules? Why can't I celebrate my birthday the way I want to with 12 birthday trips instead of this cake, instead of having a party where you feel like it's super stressful because are people going to show up? Am I going to look a certain way? Do I have to be really flashy, get all these things done? There's so much work that goes into preparing that to celebrate your birthday externally, for other people to show up to your party, for you to look good to other people. But when you travel, it's internal. You're going because you want to feel good. You want to feel good inside. You want to feel happy. You want to feel stress-free. You want to feel excited about what you're doing. And it's a completely different energy. And so that was the challenge that I took on. I did it. So the next trip, I went in February to Florence. I went back to Italy. I've been to Italy 5 times now, but I had stopped in Milan on the way back from Athens. So I was in Milan in January. I saw the Last Supper. February, I went back for Florence. Also saw a ton of art. I love art. And they have like so much art in Florence. They don't even have it in museums. They literally have some of the most valuable art in the world just out on the street because they're like, we just don't have any more room for it. Like, we just don't know where to put it. So here's like $1 billion statue just out there. And that was February. March, I went and I did a Grand Canyon trip. So I finally saw the Grand Canyon in the US. I hiked to Antelope Canyon and that area in Navajo territory in Arizona. And then from there, the trips just kept going and multiplying. April was Aruba. May, I went back to Greece because I had met a Greek guy when I was in Greece. So I went back to this random Greek island and I had a whole tale about that. Then June went to Mexico.
You had your own Mamma Mia moment.
Yeah, I did. There were a lot of men involved in this. And that was also part of it too, because you've mentioned how people sometimes think travel is therapy, but it doesn't necessarily resolve what's underneath that. And I had that moment of reckoning halfway through the year where I was like, okay, some things had gone wrong at that point. And I was like, okay, am I just hiding? Am I just running away from the problems versus actually tackling them? And how can we work through this? And it wasn't until I had something really go wrong in Argentina towards the end of the year where I had that reckoning with myself. And I was like, let's get to the point where we understand what is it that we're trying to change? How can we be happier? That doesn't have to do with eating pizza in Florence, because that can make anybody happy. It's a great momentary thing, right? In the moment, you're like, okay, this isn't bad. But how can I be happy internally with my life circumstances, with who I am as a person, with the timeline that I'm on, and still be okay with that without feeling like there's a hole in me that I have to fix and fill with other things?
Yeah. And I love that you had that recognition early on in your process. And how did that then change the rest of the year and the rest of the trips that you went on? What was the impact of having that realization that you needed to go inward a little bit?
It took me a while. Like I said, it was like that realization in June when things started going wrong with, am I happy? Is this making a difference? Am I actually changing anything? And it wasn't until November, because in June, I just had some things go wrong. I lost the car keys in Mexico, the rental car keys. I had to pay $200 to have them replaced. I lost my wallet, like a bunch of things that were just going wrong. And it felt really frustrating. But then by the time I got to Argentina, I had an issue, unfortunately, with an Uber driver that tried to assault me in the car. And so that was much more impactful. Thankfully, I'm okay. Things have worked out. The worst, I had to get away with kissing a really disgusting Uber man,
Uh,
but made it out of that situation without anything else escalating. And it's all in my book, like how do you assess like what's happening at the time, lessons
mhm.
learned moving forward. I never sit in the front of an Uber, even though in these countries they'll tell you Uber is
They
not
tell you to sit in
necessarily
front.
legit. Like,
Mhm.
so I know now, sit in the back, like so many things that I've learned. And again, I'm very grateful that I escaped with minimal damage. I just tell myself, like, people used to have kissing booths in high school and they like used to do
Yeah.
that. And like, I feel like kiss girls people if they didn't want to for charity. So if this was the worst that happened, I got off easy and I'm very
Mhm.
grateful that was the worst of it. But it was very impactful because that moment rocked me out of any kind of dreamy. It really brought me back down to earth and reality. And it's a process and there's so much to it. But there was a guy that the last guy that I had kissed was somebody that I had known from undergrad and that had continued we had met in Puerto Rico in August and we had continued an on off kind of situationship thing for years though, like for years. And so at the very least, I thought we were friends and I thought there was like a level of respect. And after we had that interaction in August, he never reached out to me. And I was like, I'm just like, I reached out to him after that Argentina incident. And I was like, I felt really hurt. And I was curious, like what happened there that like, I didn't hear from you again. Cause I thought at the very least we were friends. We have that basis
Yeah.
of years of knowing each other, working together, things like that. And what he texted me, I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. It was just like a
Oh.
couple of words and it'll stay with me forever. And I just didn't think we had a connection. That was it. That was
Wow.
it. So that moment, after being assaulted by the Uber driver, after having this guy that I thought we did have a connection tell me that, I really had a moment coming back on that flight where I was like, I have a letter that I wrote to myself. It's in the book because I actually kept it.
Oh.
Yeah, it's one of the therapeutic ways I like writing. I'm a storyteller. So I just was talking to myself through the letter. And that was the first moment where I really began to process this. Why do we feel this way? Why do you feel like you have to act this way? Why do you feel like you have to please people or put on this fault or not? I really went into it. And I feel like that moment in November was the first time that I had a moment of looking inward and actually
Mhm.
realizing like all of these things that now years later, now I'm 36, now I do inner work every single day. I have
Mhm.
affirmation cards I pull out. I start my morning with self-help audiobooks, reading things to figure things out about yourself,
Mhm.
right? But that was the first moment without having any background in this, never having been to therapy, never having learned anything about just self-soothing, which has always been
Yeah.
something I'm very good at doing. And so if we're going to self-soothe, let's talk about this. Why do you feel this way? Why did you do this? This was not your fault. We learned the lessons,
Mhm.
but you did not do this. This was not
Yeah.
you. Yes, you sat in the front seat. Yes, you're very smiley and friendly, which I am with most people. And usually it works out well. And it had worked out well the rest of the trip with all these other people that I met and that were very kind. But there's people everywhere. And so understanding this isn't your fault. What can you do better moving forward? And how can we really take this year and this experience that you've had to set yourself up for a life where you don't feel like you have to walk on eggshells, where you don't feel like you're being someone that you're not authentically.
Mhm.
And that was part of it. And that was so after that year was over, I did do a lot of growth. I did realize that I had entertained a lot of men that never were real prospects for me because I
Mhm.
like just the idea of having possibilities. But having
Mhm.
zero possibilities is better than having possibilities that aren't going anywhere.
Yeah.
Better to just be by yourself and make that space for somebody to come into your life who's actually ready and wants to be there rather than keeping around all these people who don't care and aren't really committed, but they're clogging up your energy. And
Mhm.
so at the end of that year, I was very clear on like, okay, I actually stopped dating for 3 years after that
Oh,
year
wow.
completely. I didn't date anybody at all for 3 years. And it was because I wanted to take that time to just be okay with me, be okay with being single, not feel like, oh, now I'm 31. Like I have even less time to have things. Like I really
Mhm.
wanted to get to the point where I enjoyed my life. And yeah, and travel was a big spark for showing me that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that because that is the journey, right? And we get to that point in different ways, in different situations. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that. But your story also isn't isolated, right? This is a common thing that unfortunately, as female travelers, we do have to face. So I'm very grateful that you're sharing it as well in your book because it's something that, although we don't like to think about it, that it could happen to us, it is something that we should at least be aware of and be prepared for. Hope for for the best, prepare for the worst, right? And from that point, then also picking up the mindset of how to move forward. Because again, no matter what happens, you can't change what happened. You can only change how you personally deal with it and process it and allow it to continue in your life moving forward. So also grateful that you're sharing the turning point and the lessons that you learned from that experience as well. So what a year. Oh my God. What a year. What a lot of just catalysts happening in one year. And then you celebrated your 30th birthday, right? So after this full year was your big 30. So after starting this inner work process, is that the point when you started to make a lot of changes and letting a lot of things go in your life, your career, the dating, being just a couple of them?
I knew already as I was going through this experience, like I think in April was around the time I started to double up trips. So instead of one a month, it started to be like two a month. And it started because in April, I went to the Travel Bloggers Exchange Conference, TBEX, in Huntsville,
Mm,
Alabama in 2017. So that was my first travel blogger conference. I had had a blog since 2014. I had been a freelance writer for different outlets, but I'd never actually gone and thought about my blog as a business. How do I make it its own thing? And after that conference, I did a travel writing class with Don George. And I remember being at that conference and immediately recognizing the difference in excitement levels. I used to
mm.
think professional conferences were obligatory and everybody's just there until the session's
Yeah.
over and then we can all go to the pool. That's what
Yeah.
professional conferences are, right? Like they're not fun. You do them because you
Yeah.
have to do them. And with T-Bax, it felt like a completely different story. I've never in my life, as a lawyer, I would come to the session 15 minutes late, sit in the back row. I'd
Mhm.
be browsing the internet, like doing other things, hoping nobody called on me. And
Yeah.
then at T-Bags, like, I had a completely different experience. I couldn't get to enough sessions. I was in the front row. I was asking questions afterwards so that I was late to the next session. Like I was trying so hard to soak it all in because it was all genuinely very interesting to me. And so that's how I knew that was my first hint. I'm in the wrong career. Just because I'm good at law, just because I can do it, I don't care. I don't care. I cannot say this like emphatically enough because people still ask me to this day. It has been 6 years since I practiced law, and people still ask me to this day if I'm going to go back to law. I cannot stand law. Like, there are some times I do like trial work. I do appreciate that because, like you said, that comes to the storytelling aspect of it. And that used
Mhm.
to be what I enjoyed. I was in a trial team and I would put 40 hours a week on that in law school. We have one of the top 10 trial teams in the nation because it's a storytelling. I'm going to stand here in front of the judge. I'm going to tell you a story. And by the time we're done, you're going to believe my story over this guy's story because my story is going to be better. It's going to make more sense. It's going to have more holes
Mhm.
fill in. I tell a better story than that guy. And so, and that was what I really like. And still to this day, I have a little bit of that obsession when it comes to courtroom stuff. Like I still
Mhm.
feel very intrigued by courtroom stuff. I can't watch like courtroom dramas and not feel pulled in. But like
Mhm.
and that's the only time where I really did feel genuine excitement about law because there's really no other setting in the world where people have to shut up and listen to you. And when you're done, and when you're done, somebody's going to bang a gavel and declare definitively that you win. Oh my goodness. The excitement that comes from that for me is insane. So I do still have a level of attachment to that, to courtroom dramas, to courtroom trials. Whenever I see courtroom news, people ask me a lot, like, why do you care so much? I'm like, because this is actually really fascinating. I do care. But I don't care about the law itself. And I know
Mhm.
people that do. I care about our government system. I have a lot of respect for our democracy in America and the amazing experiment that this has been. But I know a guy who's a tax lawyer and he freaking loves tax law. He loves it when there's a new clause that comes out. He loves it when there's something. He really
Oh
digs
man.
it. And tax is boring as hell. Right? So the
Yeah.
two most boring things in the world, and he really digs it. And so that's how you know. The same way I can talk to somebody about maybe analytics for social media and some people will be like, oh my God, kill me. I don't care. But I actually do care. And that's how you know that you're where you're supposed to be. And so for
Mhm.
me, law, I was good at it. I'm happy that I did it. I'm happy I helped the people that I helped during the time that I did because I worked first at a social security disability firm and then at legal aid. So I had the ability to help people just based off the fact that I thought that they were good people that deserved help. Whereas most law firms will accept clients like because they're going to pay you. So even if they're a horrible person, you still have to defend them. Once I clerked at a private law firm, and I remember having to defend a guy who was like accused of selling these teacup puppies that were like already sick.
Oh,
Yeah, and then
oh
like we went
God.
to his place and he had all these stuff. He had a stuffed tiger, and it was like this disgusting kind of like reality TV show kind of personality. And then you're like,
Yeah.
I have to defend this guy. I feel awful. So the work that I did, I actually really enjoyed. I'm happy I helped the people that I helped. I think I was meant to be in that space because it's hard to find people to care about people like that. I think it's
Mhm.
easier to find people to care about the teacup puppy guy because he has money than it is to find people about you have legitimate issues. So I was where I was meant to be for the time I was meant to be there. I made a difference in the lives of the people I was meant to be with, but I knew that was not, I didn't like it. I was
Mhm.
counting the hours until I could be done in this office so I can go home and actually work on my blog and other things. And I had no problem doing that after a full day of work, even when I was exhausted, which is another sign that's what you should be doing because that's what you're actually passionate and excited to do, not the thing that you've just been doing all day. On
Yeah.
top of that, I had already used all of my sick leave and all of my vacation days. So it got to the point where by the end of that year, I could either wait to travel for a whole other year until I re-earned those days because I had
Mhm.
used everything, or I could start making my exit. And so for me, the big thing was I had been teaching English online. I took on a job teaching English online in February of the year to fund
Mhm.
my travel. So I would wake up every morning at like 4 a.m. and I'd teach classes until I had to go to work at 9. And so I had teaching English online as an income stream, but I didn't have my own income stream that I was making from my businesses. So I knew you could make money online, which, was a big deal in and of itself because we know that now. But back when I was doing this in 2017, it's all scammy stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I knew I could do it, but I didn't have anything on my own. So my goal was to publish my first book before quitting my job so that I could prove to myself that I can make money with my own products. So I
Mhm.
did. I wrote my first book. It got published in March. I quit my job in April. The book became a bestseller in 8 categories. It won a Reader's Favorite Award, and it just showed me that I could do it. So that's when I quit my
Wow.
job in April, end of April 2018.
And oh gosh, that's amazing. And there's so many parts of that I want to dig into. But specifically in that pivot too, how did you go about publishing your own book and getting it to that point where you could make money off of it? Because that's a big step for people to be able to make that huge shift in their life, to feel like they feel confident. And I love that you use that as your gauge. But even that in itself is a huge leap for other people. So what were the steps that you took in that regard?
So there's something like 80% of people want to write a book and only 3% do. And I think
Mm.
getting out of your own way is the most important thing. Just do the thing. So many people like overthink it. They're like, I have to have a book that's my masterpiece. So many people have asked me, you're not old enough to have a memoir. And I'm like, let me actually break it down. So there's 2 different things. There's an autobiography, which is everything you want to know about a person's entire life. Like we want to know who spit on Michelle Obama in the 3rd grade because that's important, right? Whereas nobody cares about things to that extent. Whereas a memoir is a story about a moment in your time, in your life, a very finite moment, like Cheryl Strayed hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, like
Mhm.
Elizabeth Gilbert going on that 1-year challenge. It's not your entire life story. So you can write a memoir at any time if you've had an experience that's worth writing a memoir about. For me, it was this year-long travel challenge. And now that's my book now, and that was actually the book that I was thinking about writing at the time, but I realized that it was not the book that people were interested in buying at the time, because at the
Mm.
time I had been publicizing my cheap flights and how I was able to get to and from all these places because I am on a public service salary. So how can I afford to fly to Thailand, to fly to all of these places? And so I wrote my first book on what people were asking me for. People
Mm.
were asking me, how can you do these flights? So I already knew that there was a demand for this book. I already knew it was going to go well. And I had already inadvertently been promoting the book for a year by sharing all of my cheap flight deals. So I already had people who were like behind all of this and wanting to know how it was possible. And also during that year, when I was going home and working on my own stuff, part of what I was doing was listening to podcasts on self-publishing. And there's several
Mm.
of them, Kindlepreneur being one of my favorites, but I would just learn from podcasts. I'd just learn as much as possible. Hours and hours of listening to people and getting all of their best tips. And that's how I compiled my self-publishing strategy. And then from there, I wrote the book in a weekend because I was supposed to go
Wow.
to Portugal. Anger really motivates me. It's actually how I just finished. It's how I just finished a half marathon in Disney. I was so angry, and it was only my anger that got me through those last 5 miles. My friends said they've never seen anybody so angry crossing the finish line. Anger is a big motivator for me, and it makes me do things. And so I was supposed to be in Portugal that weekend. I had pre-booked that trip with a cheap flight on TAP Portugal, a $300 round trip flight. And I had gone to the dentist that morning, Friday morning. I was calling out Friday, and I had gone to the dentist that day in the morning, and my flight was leaving from Miami in the afternoon. And so my boss called me while I was at the dentist and was like, sick day, because I took the day off as a sick day. And she was like, sick days are only if you're sick. And I'm like, I'm actually literally at a doctor's office right now. I'm like actually at a doctor's office. And I felt so upset because like I'm taking the day, like I actually did make a medical appointment, and I do firmly believe still, like I know this is why I'm not an employee for anybody, but I believe like you shouldn't question my sick days. My sick days are my sick days. Why do you care if I'm hugging the toilet or if I'm out and about? Regardless, that day was mine to take. Like it's been given to me. So why do you care what I do with it? Why do I have to be home like dying and you sitting there monitoring me? Heaven forbid I do anything enjoyable on my sick day. To me, that's craziness. Like it's ridiculous. So that made me really angry. And then after I left the dentist, I was so flustered. I went straight to Miami, and I realized when I got to Miami that I had left my passport in Naples, which is where I lived.
Oh my God.
Which was 2 hours away. And normally they could still possibly rebook you, but because I had the cheapest plane ticket, they couldn't rebook me. And so I missed that flight. I missed all of my arrangements in Portugal. I had some sponsored things I was doing. I couldn't do any of that. And I was pissed off. So when I got home, I was so angry. So when I got home, I was like, oh, we writing this book. Because I'm quitting this job. We're doing this. We're publishing it. We're getting it out there. That's it. Like this is it. And I just sat for a weekend, and I furiously wrote everything I knew. By the end of the weekend, the book was done.
Wow.
Yeah. And then it was just a matter of getting all the hype up to publish it so that you can do good marketing. And that I had learned from the podcast, getting a launch team, getting all those things together. And then I published in March. And yeah. And then since then I've written 4 more books. So I have 5 books that I've self-published total. And then in 2020, when the world shut down, because my goal at the time was there's actually studies that most self-published authors who earn 6 figures or more have 20 or more books. So you just have to keep scaling, right? Because when somebody finds one of your books, they go, oh, this was great. What else have they written? And then they go and they buy everything else you've written. So you just have to keep writing. And that was originally my goal. I was like, okay, I finished the 3 books in the Travel More series. I was going to have 3 books in the Work Remotely series, which was, again, before the pandemic happened. I didn't even know it was going to be a big thing. And then the pandemic hit. My 4th book on ways to work remotely came out. That did really well. And then From Blog to Business, that was the 2nd book in the Work From Home series. And then at the time I was like, okay, it looks like this is happening. Like we're just we're stuck in this thing. So maybe now's a good time to try to get the traditional book deal for that book that I had wanted to write before about that memoir of the 12 trips in 12 months challenge. Maybe this is the best time to do it. Since I'm home, since I have the time, and I knew I wanted to do that traditionally published instead of self-published. I actually am a big fan of self-publishing. I think it's quicker. You make more royalties. You get things straight to your audience. I love self-publishing, but for 2 reasons, I didn't think that it was going to be the best thing for the memoir. If I ever wanted the memoir to be adapted into a movie, film, anything like that, it likely wouldn't happen from self-publishing. So having a publishing company helped me with that. And if I ever wanted to consider making any lists, which, TBD, that also was something that would need to be done with a publishing company versus self-publishing. It's hard to make a list as a self-published. Not impossible, but it's just hard. It's harder. I know some self-publishing authors that have come together and done it, like a pool of 30 authors who are promoting an anthology, and then they get all of their audiences behind it to try to get you on a list. So for those reasons, I knew I wanted the memoir to be traditionally published. So in 2020, I made it my goal to get an agent, to get a book deal, all of that. And it's now 2024, and my book is coming out June 4th.
Yay. Oh, that's so exciting. I can't wait to read it because I've only gotten a snippet of your story, and I'm like, okay, I want to know more about each of these locations. I want to know more about all the pivotal moments that you went through as well. So we will link that in the show notes because I'm excited to read it. And I love the way that your mind thinks because a lot of it sounds like you did just by by learning things yourself, right? Listening to podcasts. Did you go back to school at any point? Did you take on a coach or a mentor or anything? Or was this just self-help books and podcasts?
Some things along the way I've had help. Like, for instance, for the book deal, I hired a coach to help me put together the query letter and the book proposal. I've had somebody come in and help me do some website work when I switched to Trellis with Mediavine. Mediavine's my ad network. They run ads on my blog. They have a very restrictive design. And so that was very hard for me to do by myself because it requires some coding. But I have learned a lot of things myself. And I will say it's been okay. And because of that, I think I've seen slow growth for many reasons. I think being a multi-hyphenate, I've seen slow growth. Like, it's one thing if I was just Jen the author and I'm just focusing on writing books, or I'm just Jen the influencer and I'm just focusing on making videos every single day, or I'm just Jen the blogger and I'm just focused on SEO friendly blog posts and bring it like, but I am Jen so many different hats. I'm also Jen the public speaker. Like, I'm also Jen, and managing all of these income streams and building them simultaneously on my own while learning all the skills that have to do with it has been tough. And because of that, my growth has been slowed. I've seen other people that have started after me on some platforms far surpass me because that's where they're putting their main focus. Whereas I feel like I'm just trying to grow everything at once very slowly, but I'm okay with that because very early on into this and in the pandemic, where I thought initially my first goal was just to do blogging, just to get my website up to 1 million views a month or something crazy, then the pandemic hit and all the blogging traffic stopped. So I went from making $100 a day on my ads to making $3 a day overnight. And so that made me feel really like I cannot put my eggs in any one basket, because at any time, any one of these baskets could be taken away from me. And then what? So even though it has been slow growth, I feel comfortable knowing that if at any point in time, any one of these pillars just completely disappears, I'm not SOL. I still have income coming from other places. And that was very important for me as a freelancer, because otherwise being a freelancer will give you a heart attack. Like, running your own business will drive you insane. And I've been doing this now for 6 years. So it's one thing like the first year, second year, 6 years of business. And I still have moments where I'm like, whoo, I don't know about this. and so I think what helps me, and I don't know that I'd ever go back. I've had, obviously, every entrepreneur every single day considers going back and getting like a real job 20 times a day. And
I'm here with that.
Everybody does. They all do. My mom is a business owner. She has a franchise. She's had it for 15 years. Is very successful. And she tells me that all the time. Like, again, my mom and I are very close. But she's, Jen, these feelings are normal. It's okay. Because I think it's wrong. I think something is wrong. And I don't know why. It's totally fine. But every time I look at something like that, I've seen some travel writer positions at magazines and things like that. And I get such an instinctive, as much as I like mentally, I'm thinking, maybe I should be smart. Maybe I should have backup. Literally everything in my body is screaming, no! Like, screaming so violently. It's such a visceral reaction. I can't explain it. But the thought of getting paid $50,000 so that I can sit there and write 10 articles a week for somebody else's site to grow somebody else's business. Whereas if I just sat down and wrote 10 articles a week for my own website, like, I would be making so many buku bucks. And so for me, that's never the solution, because it means I'm growing somebody else's business while getting the scraps of whatever they decide to throw at me. Whereas while being an entrepreneur, you get the full pie and you decide how everything goes. And it's so stressful. And it is, but I can't give this up. I can't ever get to the point where freedom that I have to be able to go to Target at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday, to go shopping in the middle of the day when other people, I actually get really stressed out when something happens and I have to go out at 5 p.m. And I'm like, why are there so many people out? I'm like, what is going on? Because I'm used to being able to do things at a time where it's most convenient for me. I'm used to being able to set up my schedule in a way where I want to listen to an hour of self-help books in the morning before anything else gets in here and dampens my day. And I can do that, right? And I don't have to wake up at 5 a.m. to do that, to still be at work by an arbitrary time. The fact that I can set my own schedule is invaluable as an entrepreneur. So as much as people ask me, are you going back to law? I still pay to keep my law licenses inactive. Definitely at this point, I would never go back to law. If I did go into anything, it would be related to what I'm doing: travel, digital media, marketing, because this is what I enjoy and this is what I've had experience in for the last 6 years. But I really wouldn't do it kicking and screaming and something has had to have gone really wrong, because I have too many things where I know if I were to devote myself fully to this, we can easily double the income if we needed to just in this. I know if I wanted to devote myself fully to like just writing 50 blog posts this month, that's going to increase how much I'm making off my blog. And I'm balancing a million things. So I'm doing the
Yeah.
best that I can. Yeah. But I really
But
do enjoy this life.
yeah, and thank you for sharing that because I'm early in my entrepreneurship journey, and a lot of our listeners may not even be on that journey yet. And it's so rough. And especially in the beginning when you don't see a return on the work that you're doing, there's a comfort in the being employed that is tempting. But
Absolutely.
yeah, but the freedom is worth it. So I love that. I love that you shared that. But then also outside looking in, and I'm in like the beginning, right? So like outside looking in, I'm like, girl, you're killing it. Like you're getting all these awards. You have so many best-selling books out there. You have so many articles on your blog, right? So outside looking in, I feel like you're way ahead. But it's so refreshing to hear you even say, oh, I feel like I'm not even where I want to be or need to be. And so it's different perspective offering to you as well of girl, from my perspective, you're killing it. So
I know.
that's what I
No.
think.
And people say that to me all the time. And that's the really important thing about entrepreneurship and social media is that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes if you embark on this road, it can sometimes feel a little bit lonely when you're like, everybody sees me as this way, but that's
Mm-hmm.
not genuinely. And that's what it is. Social media is a highlight reel. Like people see that.
Yeah.
People don't see necessarily the down moments. And I try to share that as much as possible, at least on my Facebook page, where it's much more of a personal group, people that I've met while traveling, like my colleagues, things like that. I'm very real on Facebook. I'm like, this was tough. This was hard. This was
Mm-hmm.
hard. Everybody saw my Africa pictures, and then coming back from the gorilla trek, I was like, gorilla trekking is honestly legitimately one of the hardest things I've ever done. I tried to leave multiple times during the gorilla trekking because I was like, I'm not enjoying this. Like I'm getting stung by the stinging nettles. I have welts all over my body. I'm like
Oh
crying
wow.
so bad. It was bad. And people just see, oh, really cool, Jen, like gorilla trekking. People don't see any of the bad things that happen to you. People don't see any of that. And because of that, as a creator, it can be very isolating when but your life is super perfect and you're like, but here are all the things. So for me, I've actually worked really hard on trying to be authentic, trying to share the highs and the lows, because then otherwise I'm in my own little bubble and nobody knows what's happening other than my poor mom who's doubling as my therapist and entrepreneur coach. Damn. You know?
Yeah.
So I have to have other outlets and be able to speak honestly and share my struggles with people. And so I think as an entrepreneur, it doesn't stop. If anything, the higher up you get, I think maybe the more fearful you have that at any point in time it can all go away because you've had it
Yeah.
for so long now, and now you really can't imagine not having it. So it really is it's a stressful thing. And add to that travel, being all over the world, it's a lot of emotions, it's a lot on your body. And I'm very proud that I've made it to this point, and I'm happy that I'm able to share hopefully honest things to help people do the journey in the same way and not feel so alone if you
Yeah.
do have low moments, because it's not all highs, and sometimes the lows help you recognize the highs.
Yeah, it's so important. I think the authenticity piece, especially, I think there is more of a movement for creators to share more authentically, which is honestly such a breath of fresh air because it is rather isolating when you're going through the thick of it and you're seeing all these social media posts of just the glorious travels and people making all these streams of income and you're working day in, day out and not getting any views or you're not making any income at all. And it's like, how do I get there? At what point in the beginning of your journey did you feel like, oh wow, okay, I think I'm actually doing something. I actually feel like this could be a long-term thing. Was there a certain point, a pivot, a momentum that happened early on that you could pinpoint?
The book was a big one because that's my first product that's my own. I did something. Jen's getting the money for Jen's products. The next
Mhm.
one was monetizing the blog, which did
Mhm.
not happen until February 2019. And I started blogging in 2014. So it took me 5 years to monetize my blog. Now, knowing what I know, I could probably monetize a blog much sooner, but it took me a long time. And I remember feeling really embarrassed because I had a friend who worked at AppSumo, and I had met with him after I quit my job shortly thereafter, and he was asking me about like my income streams as a blogger, and I had nothing other than my book and teaching English online. And so I felt super embarrassed, like I have nothing, I'm not set up, why did I quit my job, like kind of thing. And so that summer I went to a conference, was this TBEX? No, I went to Traverse in Europe, and I took a day long SEO session, And then I learned about SEO. I started writing for SEO. And then approximately 6 months later is when my site crossed the threshold to be able to apply for Mediavine and start getting paid for views to my website. So that was my first time actually getting paid as a content creator, not just an author, not just a travel writer, or not just a freelance writer, which I've always had, but as a creator and as a blogger. So that was really important. And it's still to this day something that pays me every month. It's been up and down. So after the pandemic, all the ad revenue went down. And then recently this year, as traffic revenue has been recovering, travel traffic has been recovering. For a couple of years, people weren't searching for traffic. And this year, and last year, there's been a lot of Google core updates. So then people that were like, okay, everything's great. We've resolved. We're back on. And then Google does these updates. And then your posts that are on page 1 are now on page 100 and all your traffic drops. So another reason why, again, I'm super hesitant. There have been moments where I'm like, maybe I should go all in on blogging and just make the goal to make $10,000 a month just from the blog. And that has always been necessary. Because every time I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go all in, something happens and it all disappears and everybody's having a panic. And so I do think it's important to diversify, but having those moments where you're like, a new income stream has come in, something else has happened, getting the TEDx talk that happened before I got into Mediavine, and that was also a big milestone. So there was these little milestones coming along the way. My book is a bestseller. Then my book won an award. Then I got a TEDx talk. Then I got it to Mediavine and I'm monetized. And then it just went from there.
So it's like small milestones that at this point make up a larger library of bigger events. That's also a good perspective to see it, because again, when you start listing out those milestones, you're like, wow, I have a whole page of these really cool things that I've done, but these were independent things that you had to put yourself out there for, that you work towards the blog, work towards the books, work towards the speaker gigs. So yeah, it makes it a little bit more real of a journey. So I think you said you had 8 income streams, probably more now. What are your major ones that you focus on?
Sponsored blog content or sponsored influencer content on my blog, on my email newsletter, on my social. You're paying me as Jen on a jet plane to promote you to my audience of 350,000 plus followers. Okay. Blogs, my blog and my website that is monetized and makes me money every day per visitors that come to my site through Mediavine. Okay, second one. Book royalties from my self-published books that I get paid by Amazon every month. Number 4 would be affiliate revenue. So that would be from links on my site or other promotions that I do, and that gets paid in conjunction. Number 5 would be speaking engagements. So I'm speaking at the Women in Travel Summit next month, and that's something that's a paid speaking engagement. Sometimes I do virtual engagements, things like that. 6 would be my own courses and products. I have a course I'm launching now on how to be a paid influencer. I have another course on how to paid travel influencer specifically. I have another course on how to be a paid travel writer, a freelance travel writer. And I do some webinars, like I have a self-publishing webinar that I did, teaching people how to self-publish. I have a TikTok for business webinar, teaching people how to grow on TikTok. So my own products and my own launches. I think I'm missing one, but I'm blanking right now. I have it on a list somewhere. But those are the main ones, yeah.
Oh, nice. There's so many, and I know each one takes a lot of work. Do you have help at the moment, or are you just a one-woman show?
Sometimes I like to bring in people for projects. I have somebody that helps me with my website when there's certain things that need to be done. I have a partnerships manager that she works on pitching people for me because I do not have the bandwidth. I just went to a conference. We had like maybe 20 leads from that conference, but with pitching, it has to be such a continued process because maybe somebody doesn't have the budget now, maybe they don't have an answer now. And so the 20 leads from now maybe will turn into work like 2 years from now. And so you have to keep following up and keep sending them new stuff. And honestly, with all the things I'm balancing, I just am not that organized. Organization is not my skills point. Like spreadsheets are not my strong suit. So I have somebody who that is her strong suit, and she puts everybody into a funnel. And she's like, okay, it's been 2 weeks since we followed up with someone. I would never be able to get that organized not in a million years. So here's the funnel of the initial leads. Here's who responded. Here's what time, like whatever. And she has all of that. She takes 20% of my sponsorships for that, which is a good chunk of money. And it's because she is the organized one that keeps that. And because of that, too, I'm very hesitant to outsource and hire somebody full time because you're paying people a lot. And
yeah,
you don't necessarily know when the next income is coming in. Income varies. And that makes me nervous. So what I appreciate about the partnerships is that she gets paid when I get paid. So I never feel stressed about like I have to pay her something this month regardless, even if there hasn't been anything coming in. So that makes me feel a little bit more at ease. I had some people that I've brought on, and I'm working on this a little bit more for the website because I put the website aside during 2020 when it just wasn't performing at all. And now recently I've thought, I would love to bring in somebody to just update old posts, put in affiliate links where necessary, things like that. These are like minor things that just are they take some time, and so they're never at the top of my list because I have other more pressing projects that are going to pay more immediately. So I would like to bring in some staff to keep working on that back end stuff. And that's something that I'm working myself on, figuring out what the best way is to find somebody that can do that in a safe way, that can mimic my voice kind of thing, that knows how to insert links and all that stuff, and isn't going to insert a bunch of spam links into your sites. I've seen horrors with that as well. Yeah, so I am looking to outsource more administrative day-to-day things, but I do have somebody to help me with the tech stuff on the website end because I know for sure I can't do any of that stuff. And I do have somebody to help me on the partnerships end because I know for sure I don't have the organization to keep up with it. But it is something where that's something that you have to consider, like how much do you want to outsource so that you're not sitting here trying to build all 7 income streams and driving yourself crazy. And so that's something that has been the point where I'm at this point. How do I build this more into it's a business of its own, where I have employees that are working on their own things, and in doing so that they're generating more revenue for me? I think that's also the problem with outsourcing to employees. It ends up being a cost versus a money maker. Really, an employee should be somebody that's going to be making you money somehow. So Lauren, my partnerships manager, when she's done, like, you have made me money. we have worked together, and now, like, I have earned money from my relationship with you. Whereas, like, I don't want an employee to just be an expense, and I feel that's not actually making me money in some way. So I'd like to put somebody in something where I can track immediately how well this is doing. Like, I can track immediately if my affiliate sales have increased, if I have more links now through things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's another part of the entrepreneurship journey, is that you don't get there through one income stream. You have to spread your energy, and then in that process, figure out, okay, what's worth my time personally and what can I outsource to someone else that is still going to be making you money, or at least bring you time so that you can make the money. But yeah, that's another avenue as well with the entrepreneurship journey. But either way, it sounds the entrepreneurship journey, as hard as it is and as many decisions as there are that you have to make, it's still the path. You said 6 years later that brings you joy, that brings you the life that you want to continue living. So that's amazing. And we are, oh my God, we are, so I have so many questions to ask you, but we are close to our time, or at time. So I do want to just leave off with a couple of questions. What would be one question that you wished you could have asked yourself sooner at the start of your journey that maybe would have gotten you to this point much faster? If there's a tip or self-reflection question that would have sparked any transformation in you sooner.
I think it would have been great if I could have monetized my website sooner, or if I would have captured emails sooner. Because I think there was a point where pre-pandemic where my site was getting like 100,000 views a month, and none of that was being captured in emails. And so imagine how much traction, how many people went through my site that could have been potential people that are buying my books, potentially people that are doing things, and they were just lost. And so I think my question, I don't think I looked at it as a business when it was starting. I think I just opened the blog to have a creative outlet, to be able to do something besides law. I think for a long time I still thought law was going to be it for me. I still thought I was going to just be a judge and live in a courtroom, because I do being in a courtroom. I feel very at ease there. It's like not a happy place to be. I love being in a courtroom. So I was like, okay, I'll just be like Judge Judy one day. And that wouldn't have been bad. Judge Judy makes so much money.
Yeah, she does.
She does. And so I think I would have appreciated, I don't know if it would have made a difference, because I don't think I was in the mindset at that time to really be like, oh, this is going to be a business. You should work on it as a business. You should write SEO targeted blog posts. You should be capturing email leads, because none of that was in my radar. I was still on the radar of winning cases. It wasn't in the radar of like, I have to get my blog to this views. I have to have this many leads. I didn't even know what a lead was. I just wanted to write creatively and not write really mundane legal stuff. So I think knowing what I know now, I would have loved to go back and give that Jen advice and be like, okay, maybe you should collect emails. So at least it's put up like a little thing of there's a box or something. But I don't think it would have made a difference, because I think everything has happened in the time that it's supposed to, as it was supposed to. And there was still a time where I was really much in the career path of law and climbing the path of law. I'm thinking that's going to be my end goal. So I don't think you could have gone to Jen at that time and been like, actually, Jen, you're going to have a job that doesn't even exist right now. I know you don't even have a smartphone right now. But I know you still have these little flip phones, but they're going to be, in a few years, you're going to have a phone as a whole computer. and you're going to be able to make your living off of this little computer phone thing, off of like posting videos of you going places. I would be like, are you insane? I would have never fathomed this. Being an influencer was not a job. Being a blogger was not a job. And I understand it now that it's a job, and it's the same thing as any other media company. The same way I have Jen on a jet plane, the same way that like Nat Geo makes money. They're working with destination sponsors. They want to have people who read their stuff. Even Nat Geo shut down their print model, and they're going fully digital, and they're focusing on social media. So like, we are the same. We are a media company. We produce content about destinations. And so that's how you look at yourself as a business. I'm not just a random social media account and thing. Like, I am somebody that is a travel expert and is posting travel information for people to reference that. And so I think I would have loved to have taken it as a business earlier on than I did. And even as I was starting the business, I didn't know anything about entrepreneurship. It took me over a year to be monetized on my own website after quitting my job. So I don't think that there's any way it's meant to be. It has been slow, and I don't think there was any way it could have been quicker, unfortunately.
That's I think a beautiful reflection in it of itself too, because sometimes you think, oh, how did I just known this one thing sooner? But yeah, we're all on our own journeys, and the timing is already set for us. We learn the lessons along the way, and that's what gets us to this point. Yeah, it's actually, there's something freeing about knowing that, you know what, it was meant to happen this way. And so with that, what is one advice that you would give for women who are just looking to start their solo travel adventure and maybe they're a little hesitant? What would you tell them?
I want you to just take yourself out of your comfort zone, even if it's just start very small, because I know it's tough, and it's tough to be like, hey, go for a week, be by yourself in a completely foreign place where you know nobody, and do good. And that's a lot. That's a lot for most people. I already had that experience of first living on my own already for years and years, of being alone in Australia. I already had a lot of solo travel experience. I was okay by myself. Not everybody's like that. For instance, I love having dinner by myself. I love it. Yeah. And I know other women dread it, but I think it's great. Nobody's watching me eat. I can eat literally all I want. I don't have to share with you. I don't have to worry about anything. I can get the appetizer and the dessert and the drink. Like, I love it. I have no issues eating by myself. I really enjoy it. And so some women are not like that. So maybe your first thing should be take yourself out to dinner. Or take yourself out to a happy hour where there's live music, because maybe dinner makes you feel uncomfortable if you're at a fancy place and everybody's talking to each other. But go someplace a little bit social. Go sit somewhere at a bar by yourself where there's live music playing, where there's things happening. If there's a trivia night or something going on, just get comfortable with being on your own and be like, oh, I went to go do a fun thing on my own, and I enjoyed doing that thing that I found fun on my own, period. Whatever you like to do, go do something you enjoy doing alone. And don't wait for somebody else to join you to do it. If you want to take that, I've been dying to do this. I've been dying to take this crochet class at Michael's, because I just want to sit and relax and do some crochet and like work with my hands and get into a rhythm. And I'm just waiting until the right one is offered that fits with my travel schedule. But I do not care if I'm the youngest person in that class. I do not care if I do not have anybody else to go with me. I do not care, because all I care about is I'm going to take myself to go do something fun that I want to do because I want to do it. And that should be your starting point for all solo travel. What is the fun thing that you want to do? Because once you identify that, it's going to have you approaching it in a way of anticipation and excitement versus nerves and fear. It's the same frequency. Anxiety and excitement are the same frequencies, the same feeling in your body. But when you reframe it from I'm so nervous, I'm so scared, like I don't really know, to I'm so excited, this is going to be amazing. And the way you get there is by actually wanting to do what you're about to do. So when you're picking your solo trip, pick something really awesome that you want to do. And I can't speak to that because I know I have weird things I enjoy and that I tell myself I want to do. I make a running list of things I want to see all over the world. I know I want to go to the Uyuni Salt Flats in Bolivia because I want to take pictures of me with a toy dinosaur and me and the optical illusion and looking like the dinosaurs eating me. That's very important to me. And so what is important to you and what makes you really happy? For me, it's usually very nerdy things, right? And I love that. I just went to Scotland because I wanted to ride the real life Hogwarts Express. And that was something that made
I saw that video.
Yeah. And that made me really excited, right? So what makes you excited? What are you like really wanting to do? What would you be psyched about planning for, about getting your outfits ready, about figuring out what you need to do to get there? And that's how you should start your solo trip. And that can happen literally anywhere. It can be 10 minutes from your house. It could be across the world. It could be in another state. I have many friends, many female friends that have told me that they've been inspired, and then they took their first solo trip to Boston or to Michigan, or great. Again, what is it that you want to see? You don't have to leave the US to see things. It's about to be April. We're going to have tulip fields all over Michigan and Washington
Yes.
State. So you can have your own little, the Netherlands adventure, frolicking through tulip field on your own and just being like, wow, I am surrounded by literally fields and fields of beauty. Pick what you like that excites you and start planning for that, because travel's not just about the moment that you're in it. The benefits of travel also extend beforehand in the planning stage. Like, you get so much joy in preparing for and planning for a trip. So don't skip on that. Get excited. And that joy can get you through the mundane days, the hard days where you're like, okay, this sucked, but I'm just going to go in and look really quick and see how many pools are at that hotel that I'm staying at. Which pool do I want to go to in the morning, and which one's going to have the best evening sun? That's going to bring you serotonin. You're going to feel so good. So start there, and just remember that you don't have to go big to go solo. You can start small and work your way up.
Oh, love it. I love that advice. I personally have a dinosaur chasing me in Uyuni photo. So
you get it.
I get it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it took me at least an hour to crouch and get that dinosaur chasing us. It's 100% worth it. And
Yes.
that was what brought me joy.
Amazing. I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah. And so thank you again so much. I want to close on one question. How is play part of your daily life today?
I think travel is play, and it's why I look forward to it, why I enjoy it, why I feel rejuvenated coming back from it, because it allows me to be fully in my body, in my senses, and get out of my head. Because when you land in a new place, you have to smell new things, you have to hear new languages, you have to see new sights. All your senses are being bombarded with new, which means that it's impossible to be in your mind worried, depressed about the past, anxious about the present or the future. You're not. You're in the now. And that mystical now is so hard for me to capture as an overthinker, that just travel is my hack. And it's how I get somewhere and I'm like, ooh, I'm actually living. I'm here for today. I'm here for right now, for this moment. And that's a beautiful thing.
It is. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing those last tips as well. It's going to be such an inspirational episode for so many listeners. And I can't wait for them to all resonate with your story. So tell us, please, before we go, how can we buy your book? How can we find out more about all of these things that you're doing, that you've worked so hard to be able to share with the world?
Yes, so you can find me at jenonajetplane.com. That's my website. And then at all social media, Jen on a Jet Plane, like leaving on a jet plane, Jen on a Jet Plane. And then my book, 12 Trips in 12 Months, is available for pre-sale now. Comes out June 4th. You can find that on Amazon, anywhere books are sold. And I also think I'm going to be giving you a link for people to, if they want to find a list of flight alert sites, which is usually my most popular link for people because everybody wants to get cheap flights. So this is a list of programs where you can sign up and get flight alerts and get notified when there are flight deals. And hopefully that'll help some of your readers travel more.
Yes, 100%. That would be amazing, because I think that is definitely a popular asked for item of like, how do I start? How do I get some cheap flight deals? How do I get on this journey? Thank you so much for sharing not all, actually, you have to read the book for the rest of the story, but a little sneak peek about your story, your pivot, and the overall transformation that this year had given you to become where you are now in this life. So thank you so much for coming on today. And it was such a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise.
Thank you. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in today. I hope Jen's story resonated with you and inspires you for your own travel journey of transformation, connection, and play. Thank you, and see you all in the next adventure. All right, everyone, that's all we have time for today. But before you jet set off to your next adventure, I want to remind you about Passport to Connection. This is an incredible platform that's going to be your one-stop shop for finding meaningful connections in any city that you explore. Search for communities, apps, groups, resources that perfectly match your vibe, whether you're an extrovert or an introvert. Head over to travelnotsescape.com/friends and sign up for Passport to Connection today. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode, and happy travels. Until next time, keep exploring, connecting, and playing, and safe travels, navigators.